Chapter 31. Unplanned meetings for you are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Dovi Ko, seeing that it was Xian Zihao, Jiang Rulan inwardly frowned. Why was he always seeing her in such a sorry state? Jiang Bingqing fought for a while but could not escape. She turned around and wanted to curse, but she was surprised to see Xian Zihao. Her face stiffened and slowly lowered her hand in embarrassment. She quickly carved a harmless smile. Brother Zihao. What's going on? Xian Zihao looked at Jiang Rulan expressionless. The right side of her face was red and swollen. This slut was trying to attack me. Jiang Bingqing quickly opened her mouth to explain. Xian Zihao glanced at her coldly. I asked her. I did not ask you. Jiang Bingqing stared at him unhappily. Xian Zihao lightly said, didn't you say you were going to the washroom to fix your makeup? I just ran into this little bitch all of a sudden. Bingqing. Xian Zihao's expression was cold as he pointed to the door in the distance with his chin. Go back. Go back. He raised his voice. Jiang Rulan had never seen this woman being afraid of anyone before. However, she seemed to be very afraid of Xian Zihao. Jiang Bingqing pouted her lips, glared at her, Jiang Rulan, unwillingly, and left in a huff. Noticing Xian Zihao's gaze on her face, Jiang Rulan raised her hand to rub her hair onto her cheeks, trying to hide her red and swollen face. Just as she was about to walk past him, her wrist was suddenly grabbed. What was going on right now? Didn't she dare to face Han Shuigang at the soaring club that day? She even stepped into the explosion calmly. Why did she let Jiang Bingqing do that? Xian Zihao stood in front of her. His thick black eyes looked at her, trying to figure out what was playing in her mind. He lifted her chin with his hand and looked down at her red eyes. Jiang Rulan pulled her chin away from his hand and asked in a low voice, your relationship with Jiang family is very good, isn't it? Xian Zihao raised his eyebrows. Does that matter? No, it doesn't matter. Jiang Rulan tried her best to shake off his hand, but he held her tightly and pulled her back, causing her to crash into his chest. She hurriedly pushed him away, barely managing to stand up straight. As Jiang Rulan retreated to the wall, she raised her head and looked straight at him. You had dinner with her, but she didn't say anything about me. Xian Zihao looked at her calmly. She did. As if she knew it would turn out like this, Jiang Rulan sneered. Since you already know who I am, why do you pretend to care? President Xian, even if you are kind, you don't have to behave like that. Enough already. She turned and walked towards the elevator while holding the wall. She suddenly felt a strong dizziness. Xian Zihao looked at her staggering figure and said, this will not affect our marriage registration tomorrow. Jiang Rulan suddenly wanted to laugh. She turned and exclaimed, if you marry me, what will happen to her? Without her saying anything, they all knew who she meant. Xian Zihao pursed his lips tightly as if he did not want to answer her question. Jiang Rulan just sneered at him. As if a century had passed, his tightly closed lips moved slightly. I will deal with it. Chapter 32. Unforgettable memory. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Deal with it. What will he do? Jiang Rulan couldn't endure her dizziness anymore. She quaked slowly and was sent home by Xian Zihao. When she woke up, it was already past 1 in the morning. Jiang Rulan opened her eyes and was met with Jiang Yijuan's unreadable gaze. The gaze that seemed to be able to see through her. You're awake. He removed the cold towel from her forehead and rubbed her swollen face gently. Jiang Rulan wanted to talk but found that she was too tired to say anything. The past that he could not let go, hauled back into his life after 7 years of separation. The bitter and painstaking farewell she spent for 7 years, were all still rooted in her life. The man who sent you back didn't say anything. He just said you were drunk. Jiang Yijuan rubbed his neck anxiously. She saw the overflowing fear under his calm expression. Yes, fear. 7 years ago, Jiang Rulan and Jiang Yijuan lived an inhumane life in the Jiang family, for no other reason than they were children born out of love and were raised outside Jiang family. When their mother was forced into a corner and had to commit suicide by jumping from the building in front of them when they were young, Chairman Jiang took them back to Jiang family. Jiang Yijuan, as a son, Jiang family appreciated his lineage and treated him better. However, Jiang Rulan, just because she was a girl and they were afraid she will challenge the position of another daughter, she has lived a worse life than a servant in Jiang family. They were often for her to starve. Within a few days, she would be dragged into the room by Madame Jiang, who was in a bad mood, and they would hit and beat her up. During those years, not a single part of Jiang Rulan's body was not damaged. When she was 17, she was abducted by members of the Black Society who had been hired by Jiang Bingqing on her way home from school, and she was injected with stimulants, leaving her naked and confined to a number of old men. If Jiang Yijuan and Gengxin hadn't found her earlier, she would have been raped and died. When she had a fever, Madame Jiang threw her into the snowfield in the front yard, saying that she was helping her to cool her body temperature. By the time Jiang Yijuan rushed back, Jiang Rulan was already almost out of breath. When she was rescued in the hospital, she remained silent until the 15th day of the first month, when she quietly packed her things and left. Jiang Yijuan knew what she was thinking, so he waited at the intersection. He went with her and left the hell-like Jiang family together. Chapter 33. Jiang Yijuan's Anger. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 33. Jiang Yijuan's anger. Since that year, Jiang Rulan had changed. When she was a child, she was very quiet and obedient, was often bullied by others. But now, she became like a hedgehog, and whoever bullied her, will be paid 10 times by her. It was as if she had been born again in that winter. She wanted to bring back all the suffering and let everyone who had tortured her felt what pain was. But no matter how much she wanted to forget what happened 7 years ago, she could not. In this world, no one understood her better than Jiang Yijuan. He knew how much she hated the Jiang family, and he also knew that she had to suffer from Jiang Bingqing over and over again because of their mother's last words. Silently, he squeezed her hand, which was lying flat on his side. Jiang Rulan looked at Jiang Yijuan's face. Her eyes were glassy. She struggled to get up and said, "Yijuan, go pack your things." "For what? You don't have to be here. You need to go back to F City." Jiang Rulan pulled back the covers and got off the bed. She took a glass of water next to the bed and drank it. She then glanced at the crystal necklace in the slightly open drawer. She took out the necklace. Jiang Yijuan did not say a word as he sat on the edge of the bed. He silently looked at her and clenched his fists tightly. "You want me to go at this time?" Jiang Rulan walked quickly to the wardrobe and started packing Jiang Yijuan's belongings. "I will move tomorrow. Mom had left this necklace on me, and after so many years, I still don't understand why Jiang family wanted it, but it's still Mom's valuable item and no matter what, I don't want to lose it. I decided you should take this necklace." With that said, Jiang Rulan opened Jiang Yijuan's bag and put on his clothes one by one. Jiang Yijuan just looked back at her hurried movement. "Is it any use running away? Didn't you say that no matter where we went, as long as Jiang family wanted to look they will be able to find us? We are not running away." Jiang Rulan astonishingly lifted her head, her gaze was clear. "I never needed to flee. But for now, I hope you can bring the necklace back to F City. No matter what happens with Jiang family, you will not intervene and try to save me. With the necklace in your hand, it will be much safer than being here. Jiang Rulan. Can you stop thinking of me as a child who still needs your protection? No matter what happens, you always bear it in your heart. You always deal with it alone. No matter what happens, you will always let me go first. How much strength do you have to carry so many burdens on your shoulders? Have you ever thought about how I feel? I've been pushed away by a woman like you, and I've watched you endure all the pains by yourself. I wonder how you are still alive." Jiang Yijuan suddenly threw the necklace on the bed and quickly approached her. He grabbed her arm and pulled her to his chest. Holding his shoulder, he shouted angrily, "How long can you last? Look, I am no longer the brother you need to protect. As long as you are willing, I can protect you. As long as you are willing. Do you understand? Jiang Ruolin. Do you understand?" Chapter 34. Leave. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jiang Ruolin was a little dazed because of Jiang Yijuan's shaking. She looked at him, who was talking sharply to him with a dumb look. Unable to bear his shaking and loud voice, Jiang Ruolin angrily threw his clothes on the bed. "I will not take the exam. I will continue working at a multinational company after my 3rd year is over. After half a year of training, my superiors have given me the priority to be promoted. So you don't have to worry. I will take care of you. I know your personality. I've figured out a way to tell you about this. If you knew I was leaving school, you would be sad. But Ruolin, you are too arrogant. When I said that I would take care of you, I really meant it." Jiang Ruolin just stared blankly at him. Seeing that she was not moving, Jiang Yijuan lowered his voice. He gently rubbed her shoulder and looked at her seriously. "If you want to face Jiang family, then let's face them together. If you want to go, let's go together. Remember, 7 years ago, when I said that I wanted to go with you, you smiled at me, then held my hand and left without hesitation." Jiang Ruolin coldly looked at the eagerness in Jiang Yijuan's eyes. "Since you no longer need my care, then you can leave." Jiang Yijuan froze for a moment and she clearly saw the pain in his eyes. "Go. Get out of here now." Jiang Ruolin looked at him without the slightest emotion. She shook her hand and bent down to take his luggage, then put the necklace on the bed into his hand. She then dragged Jiang Yijuan's luggage with one hand and pushed him out the door. "Jiang Ruolin." Jiang Yijuan looked at her face and thought she was angry. He quickly turned to explain, but she pushed him to the door, throwing his luggage out, and pushed him with both of her hands, "Go away. Leave. Jiang Ruolin." Jiang Yijuan pushed the door open with one leg. Seeing that she was serious, he raised his hand to grab her. Jiang Ruolin pushed him out of the house and quickly closed the door. "Jiang Ruolin. Open the door. Please open the door. Jiang Ruolin. Hurry up and open the door. Let me in." She ignored the knocking on the door and locked it from the inside. She could hear his hurting voice. "Jiang Ruolin, please let me in." Jiang Ruolin leaned against the door, lowered her head and closed her eyes. No matter what, she can't let him stay here any longer. If Jiang Bingqing knew that Jiang Yijuan was also in H City, she would definitely let him suffer as well. Since his current life was safe, he must leave. Suddenly, a loud sound came from the door. It was the sound of Jiang Yijuan stomping on the door. Jiang Ruolin got up and saw through the peephole that Jiang Yijuan was standing in front of the door with the necklace tightly held in his hand. She quickly went into her bedroom and found her bag. She took out the account book that she had put in a few days ago and carefully put it back in her bag. No matter what the angle, she had no way out for this marriage. "Xian Zihao, I hope you won't go back on your word." Chapter 35. Don't ever think of marrying him. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 35. Don't ever think of marrying him. Jiang Ruolin had learned her lesson from last time when she was late at Xian Group, so this time she arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau half an hour earlier than scheduled. Looking around, she could not see Xian Zihao's car, so he may not have arrived. Seeing a coffee shop across the street, she decided to sit down first. Just as she stepped forward, she suddenly felt pain in her wrist. Jiang Rulan turned and saw that Han Shuigang appeared out of nowhere. Come with me. Other than coldness, there was nothing on his face. He pulled her wrist hard, heading towards the silver-gray Mercedes-Benz before she could resist. Feeling disgusted, Jiang Rulan tried her best to struggle free. Let go. However, no matter how much strength she had, she couldn't twist his clawed hand. The strength was almost enough to crush her wrist. Let go. Take your dirty hands away. Jiang Rulan, can you really do it? Do you really want to marry Xian Zihao and be the lady boss? Let me told you. In your dreams. You love me so much, how can you be willing to marry another man? What? Is it because you are interested in Xian Zihao's family background and in the blink of an eye, you've rushed into his arms? Han Shuigang. You're crazy. Jiang Rulan was so angry. She lowered her head and bit the back of his hand, forcefully shaking him off at the moment. Han Shuigang was in so much pain that he had no choice but to let go of his grip. Jiang Rulan hurriedly stepped back as she looked at him carefully. What qualifications do you have to stand here and stop me? Who do you think you are? You are a bastard that I, Jiang Rulan, do not want. If you want to pretend to be in love, then please continue to hug your Ling Fei. Have you forgotten what I said that day? I warned you not to challenge my limits. I warned you not to show your face to me again. You will definitely regret marrying him. Han Shuigang said angrily. Being with a bastard like you is what I regret the most. Piss off. Get out of my sight. Jiang Rulan sneered. No matter what, don't even think of marrying him today. Han Shuigang suddenly became ruthless. He grabbed her hand again and pulled her towards the Mercedes on the side of the road. Jiang Rulan couldn't get rid of him. Han Shuigang stretched out one hand to open the car door while the other held her. He pushed her forcefully and was about to close the car door when someone interrupted. Vice President Han, where do you want to take my fiancée? Jiang Rulan's tense nerves were immediately relaxed. As soon as she heard Xian Zihao's voice, Han Shuigang's grip on her hand stiffened slightly. She took the opportunity to push him away. Turning around, she saw Xian Zihao wearing clean and fresh white casual clothes. He had one hand in his pocket and his electronic car key hung on his finger. His eyes showing an intriguing smile. Chapter 36. Do you two know each other? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Seeing her torn clothes and the ponytail, which was initially tied behind her head, was in disarray, Xian Zihao hid his expression while holding out his hand towards her. Jiang Rulan glared sharply at Han Shuigang, who had an ugly expression, then walked towards Xian Zihao. As she approached him, Xian Zihao raised his hand and pulled the hair from her cheek behind her ear. He looked like a very gentle and loving husband. If Jiang Rulan had not woken up, she might have really gotten caught in this unpredictable male net. What kind of person was he? It was impossible to know what was going on in his mind. At this moment, Jiang Rulan was slightly absent-minded and Xian Zihao took this opportunity to grab her hand gently. It looks like Vice President Han and my fiancé have an unusual relationship. What is this? Do you two know each other? His voice was filled with unpredictable coldness. President Xian. Han Shuigang hid the reluctance in his eyes and said, Miss Jiang and I used to be classmates while we were at university. After hearing that she was getting married today, I came here to congratulate her. I initially wanted to invite Miss Jiang to have a drink because I thought she was too nervous. Jiang Rulan secretly rolled her eyes and did not open her mouth to protest. It was better for her not to add to the problem. She was too tired to fight with him this time. Oh. Xian Zihao calmly raised his delicate eyebrows. How did Vice President Han knew that Lan Lan and I were getting married today? Han Shuigang's body became tense. At the same time, Jiang Rulan turned and looked at him again. Right, how he knew. Sorry, I still have some urgent things to deal with, so I won't bother you two anymore. As he spoke, he went around the car and got in. In the blink of an eye, he left. Jian Ruolan looked at the gradually shrinking car. She casually whispered to the person next to her. After you sent me home that night, someone was secretly holding a mini camera. She suspected that the person was sent by Han Shuigang or someone else, otherwise, it was unlikely he knew they would be here today. Xian Zihao's mouth curved slightly while looking at the distant traffic, disagreeing. There will be a lot of these things will happen in the future. After saying that, he turned to look at her. If you are scared, I can arrange some people to be with you from tomorrow onwards. No need. I don't need any bodyguards. Jian Ruolan quickly refused, and at the same time, she realized that Xian Zihao was still holding her hand. However, when she was about to pull her hand away, the hand holding her suddenly tightened slightly. She was surprised. Her whole body stiffened as Xian Zihao lowered his head and whispered in her ear. Don't move. Chapter 37. Have you ever been to Jiang's mansion? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 37. Have you ever been to Jiang's mansion? Jian Ruolan snapped out of her daze and looked around. Sure enough, there were two people standing behind a high-voltage telephone pole opposite the Public Affairs Bureau. Who were they working with? Ordinary small media did not dare to follow the development of Xian Zihao's personal life. From this, it could be seen that the backgrounds of these people were not ordinary. She suddenly wanted to know more about himself. All these years, Xian Zihao was always in the dark, right? How much dark was it? The rewards for his head alone worth 1,000,000 yuan. Jian Ruolan had just opened her mouth when Xian Zihao pulled her towards the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau. President Xian, What is it? I gave you a week to think, and now you're backing off. He stopped and looked back at her. I'm not going back on my words. Jian Ruolan paused, looking at the playfulness in his eyes. I just want to know, what is your relationship with Jiang family? Xian Zihao laughed softly, holding her hand in one hand while casually inserting the other into his pants pocket. He glanced at the people who came and went to the Civil Affairs Bureau as if finding her question laughable. You know, this marriage is not based on emotions, it's just a matter of individual needs. Even so, there are still some things I want to explain. Jian Ruolan looked up at Xian Zihao half-smiling profile. My mother is Madame Jiang's older sister, but my relationship with Jiang family is very normal and we rarely interact. On the other hand, Madame Jiang often brought Bingqing to see my mother. His handsome eyebrows rose slightly. Have you been to the Jiang family's mansion before? Xian Zihao finally turned to face her. His thin lips moved slightly. How did you know? Jian Ruolan looked at the probing look in his eyes and didn't know what to say. Apparently, she had mistakenly treated him as her savior, but she had never existed within his memories. 7 years ago, after I returned from the United States, I went to Jiang family's mansion once. That was the only time. His gaze was glued to her calm face. Why? What else do you want to ask? Jian Ruolan's lips moved slightly as if to say something. Her eyebrows were slightly raised, but her doubts were just hard to voice. Seeing that she wanted to say something, Xian Zihao's sharp and cold eyes were locked on the slender figure in front of him, his gaze never left her face. If you want to ask about Cui Lucian. He suddenly opened his mouth. Jian Ruolan suddenly looked up. Xian Zihao's thin lips curved into a cold smile. You don't have to worry about repeating the path your mother once took. We may get married, but it's not because of love. His words hit the mark, and Jian Ruolan immediately became displeased. She was so embarrassed that she had been poked in the middle so easily and even angered at the impoliteness in his words. Jian Ruolan immediately straightened her expression and said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. President Xian has always been so subtle even though he mocked people, but unfortunately I have been training my thick skin for years and I am immune to swords and spears. I just don't want to spoil other people's feelings, because I know how it feels to be hurt and betrayed. Xian Zihao watched her closely. His eyes never left her face. The expression in his eyes was extremely complicated, and no one could understand what he was thinking. A trace of an unfathomable smile appeared on his lips as he lowered his head and whispered into her ear, "Jiang Rulan, you're really like a hedgehog." Chapter 38. Why me? You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Jiang Rulan was stunned and quickly tried to push Xian Zihao away, but the grip on her waist suddenly tightened. His lips seemed to brush gently towards her ears, causing her to shiver uncontrollably as she raised her hands to block it. She raised her head and glared at him. Xian Zihao did not use too much force, but his power was too much for Jiang Rulan to fight freely. She resentfully looked at the cold mockery in his eyes and caught a glimpse of the indentation of his lips. You. If this continues, the Civil Affairs Bureau will be closed. Xian Zihao suddenly smiled for no reason and let go of his grip. Jiang Rulan was a little shaken and staggered. A look of embarrassment flashed across her originally angry face. Teasing her was a very interesting thing for Xian Zihao. The smile in his eyes deepened. Are you waiting for me to propose? Jiang Rulan quietly calmed her heart. She saw a faint smile in his eyes and cursed him 10,000 times in her heart. She finally said, "No need." Xian Zihao took the lead in stepping through the doors of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Their marriage registration was separate from the others, so this matter was settled more quickly than others. At least, with Xian Zihao here, no one dared make him wait any longer, even if he did not urge them. 15 minutes later, they both exited the Civil Affairs Bureau. Jiang Rulan knew it was too late for her to regret, but she still looked at the tall figure in front of her with a confused expression. Why did Xian Zihao choose her? Xian Zihao turned to her. You don't know much about Xian family, do you? How did Jiang Rulan not know that Xian Zihao's grandfather was a great general during the war against Japan and a well-known general in the country? However, the point behind his question was that if one day he no longer needs her, he will not be able to divorce her easily. The full power and rights as Xian Zihao's wife given to her made her feel unhappy. Jiang Rulan did not understand how someone like Xian Zihao could be so hasty towards marriage. Why me? She muttered as she squeezed the marriage certificate in her hand. Xian Zihao pursed his lips. Everyone is the same. Excuse me. Jiang Rulan was stunned. Xian Zihao stood outside the door, his tall and noble figure under the scorching sun looked like a blazing fire as if he was free from the world. Upon hearing her approached, he did not look back. His gaze moved through the flow of traffic and landed in an unknown place. Xian Zihao spoke in a cold and faint voice. If you can't love me in this life, it will be the same for everyone. Jiang Rulan was stunned. She seemed to be beginning to understand himself. She stood next to him while looking into his eyes with confusion. Could it be that the person Xian Zihao loves was not Cui Lucian but someone else? Would someone as superior as him be hurt by love? Chapter 39. Promise you are listening at NovelFull.audio. A black Land Rover stopped in front of Jiang Rulan's company. She thanked him and turned to get out of the car. After work, go back to your house and pack your things. I will send someone to pick you up at 7 p.m. Xian Zihao said as she opened the door. Jiang Rulan looked at him. Where do you want to take me? Do you want to be harassed by the media all the time when they see us living apart after we get married? Xian Zihao looked at her coldly. Jiang Rulan nodded understandingly. I understand. With that, she got out of the car and waited for him to leave. She was still standing in front of the entrance in a daze. Did she get married just like that? From morning until now, Jiang Ruolin had been somewhat muddle-headed. When she entered her house, she was startled to see Jiang Yijuan sitting on the sofa in the living room, looking at her intensely. By the time she left home this morning, Jiang Yijuan, was no longer outside. Jiang Ruolin thought he was gone, but she did not think he would return when she left. She looked towards the luggage she had left in front of her bedroom door this morning. In fact, even though Xian Zihao did not tell her, she will still be out of the house today. Originally, she said goodbye to Xiong Rugang in the morning and decided to stay in the hostel. So she had packed her things first. However, when faced with Jiang Yijuan's cold gaze, she could only sigh. Aren't you supposed to be in F City? Have you found a place to live? Instead of answering, he asked. Jiang Ruolin nodded. Jiang Yijuan looked at her silently for a long time before finally, nodded. His eyes were full of helplessness towards her. It's good to move away, and I also know that you will not be bothered by Jiang Bingqing anymore. If you really don't want me to be here with you, I will return to F City, but you must promise that I can meet you at any time. Jiang Yijuan seemed to have been thinking about it calmly. Jiang Ruolin smiled with satisfaction. All right. With that, she walked to pick up her luggage. Luckily, she was only in H City for a month, so she didn't bring much stuff at the time. Looking at the time again, it was almost 7 o'clock. Jiang Ruolin ran to the window and looked outside. As expected, she saw a luxury car that had just stopped in front of the entrance of the residential complex. My friend sent me a car to pick me up. Jiang Ruolin said vaguely. Then, she took her luggage and was about to walk out, but then she froze. Jiang Yijuan was leaning against the door without moving, his hands crossed over his chest while looking at her. After looking at Jiang Ruolin for a moment and seeing the persistence in her eyes, Jiang Yijuan leaned over to pick up her luggage and whispered, I'll do it. No need. Cut the crap, hurry up and get out. I really lost to you. He frowned. The discomfort in his eyes was obvious, but there was also a complete compromise. Jiang Ruolin hesitated for a moment. Taking advantage of her confusion, Jiang Yijuan carried her luggage and walked downstairs quickly. Jiang Ruolin suddenly thought of a car outside the residential area. Looks like she can't hide it anymore. Chapter 40. Young Madam, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Jiang Ruolin smiled gratefully as she handed over her luggage to the two men who got out of the car. She watched them carry her luggage into the trunk. One of the men in his early 30s nodded respectfully at her and said, Please get in the car. Sensing that Jiang Yijuan's gaze was about to pierce her, Jiang Ruolin calmly rubbed her nose. She did not dare to look back and was ready to get into the car when she heard Jiang Yijuan's cold voice. Jiang Ruolin, shouldn't you explain it to me? She paused, hesitating. Another middle-aged man beside her said, Please get in the car first. Hearing the man's words, Jiang Ruolin remembered Xian Zihao's concept of time and she got into the car without further delay. As the car door closed, Jiang Yijuan frowned and wanted to step forward, but the two men blocked his way. She couldn't hear what the two men were saying to him, but as they got into the car, Jiang Yijuan did not move forward. He just looked at her as if he didn't know her at all. The car slowly moved forward. Jiang Ruolin was startled and the phone in her bag rang. She took it out and saw that it was Jiang Yijuan. After a moment of hesitation, she then answered the call and gently placed the phone next to her ear. Jiang Ruolin. What has happened? What did they call you, young madam? How many secrets are you hiding from me? What does young madam mean? Damn it. Jiang Ruolin, did you get married behind my back? A thunderous voice was heard from the phone, and Jiang Ruolin was immediately stunned. Young madam. She quickly looked at the person driving the car, and the young man sat in the front passenger seat. After thinking for a moment, she said into the phone, Don't worry, I'll explain everything to you when I have time. With that, she quickly hung up the phone and carefully looked at the two men sitting in front of her. Are you the person sent by Xian Zihao? If they were sent by Xian Zihao, they would not have called her young madam. Young madam, please don't panic. We are General Xian's subordinates. When he found out about the young master's marriage, he specifically sent us to bring young madam to Xian's mansion for dinner. General Xian. Xian Zihao's grandfather. Her face was immediately pale. How could General Xian's subordinates invite her? Why did Xian Zihao not explain it clearly to her? But according to Xian Zihao's usual behavior, he cannot be this sloppy. Jiang Rulan calmly looked at the two men. She lowered her head and muted her phone. Then, she secretly sent a message to Xian Zihao's personal number. Why did General Xian send someone to pick me up? About a minute after sending the message, she received a reply. She opened it and saw only 4 words. I will be there. It seems that Xian Zihao did not know that his grandfather would interfere with this problem. Why did General Xian keep his grandson in the dark and bring his new granddaughter (in-law) alone to Xian's mansion? The biggest question was, why did he hide it from his grandson and play such a trick on her?